Should we dive in and let everyone see what we spoke about?
Yeah, everyone. Mark and I really hope you enjoyed this fantastic conversation with the incredible Mark Shaw from Then Jerico.
So I went for 5 days to New York, and I get a phone call from the head of the company. It's gone back into the charts. You better get on the plane. You better get on the plane now.
Listen, welcome to another amazing interview edition of Electronic Cafe. Our guest today lit up our turntables in the late 80s with some massive anthemic songs that sound as good today as they did then. Mark Shaw, Then Jerico, welcome to Electronic Cafe, my friend. It's so good to have you on the EC.
Cheers, guys. Thank you both for inviting me. It's a privilege to be here.
Lovely to have you here. I'm just interested to know, because Mark and I tried to get access and we didn't, but we've met loads of people that have. But when you were so big at that point, was you aware of that, or did you just?
Not really. It was odd, because I tell you what happened, Andy. It was one of those things that we released. Like the first single, The Big Sweep, was released, and London wouldn't put it out because they decided that the lyric was. I stupidly told them that it was about Murdoch and Maxwell. London just had kittens and said, we can't release this. So as we recorded it at Martin Rushent's studio, it was owned by Martin Rushent, and Nigel Revler was his manager, and he managed Pete Shelley from the Buzzcocks. And Pete had his own label called Immaculate. So he said, well, we'll put it out for you. So we stuck out The Big Sweep on did 1,000 copies only on Immaculate. And Immaculate, London said, you can't sign to them, you sign to us. I went, no, we fucking well can. So we stuck out 1,000 copies. It went to number 12 in the indie charts. And this got us a lot of press attention. Then we had a track called Fault, and it created a certain amount of interest. But London said, well, we got it remixed in New York, but London still didn't think it was a hit record. So they only released 10,000 of those. So we had the first two singles that were kind of like non-starters, but they sold pretty quickly because they were in short supply. And so we called them limited edition, rather than nobody wants to release our music, which is what really was the truth. So we kept thinking we weren't going to get anywhere. Then we put Let Her Fall out, and that bounced off the charts, went to about 70 or something. And then we put out Muscle Deep, similar fate, and we were getting radio play, but we just weren't selling singles. So we then did the cover of Prairie Rose. I, by this point, had co-produced the first album, and London wanted to put that out as a single. Now, I knew it wasn't going to be a single. In its own form, its initial form. So we went into a studio with Greg Walsh, went to Eel Pie Studios, which was owned by Pete Townsend, and we ended up overdubbing Prairie Rose and putting a lot more synths on it, and put out a more electro version of it, which Radio 1 loved, but the music press hated, and the public didn't really like. So that went to number 70. So we thought, this is it, it's all over. And they finally said, London said, right, we're going to put out The Motive. And if The Motive isn't a hit, we're going to drop you. So put The Motive out, and it crawled up the charts, and then it got to about number 40, and then Gallup, who were compiling the charts at the time, decided that London Records were hyping the Fine Young Cannibals. They said, hang on, you're doing something funny here. And what they'd done is they'd mixed up the barcodes, and they'd put the Fine Young Cannibals barcode on our record. But put it this way, so every record that we were selling, the Fine Young Cannibals were getting the credit for it. But, no problem with the Cannibals. They're lovely geezers.
Oh, yeah.
So what happened was Gallup then weighted The Motive. They handicapped it. So it got to number 40, and we thought we got Top of the Pops, brilliant. And then they busted it back to number 45 or number 42. So then we didn't get Top of the Pops. So that was it. We were going to get dropped. So I said, it's over. Got on a plane, flew back to New York with my wife at the time. I get a phone call from the head of the company. It's gone back into the charts. You better get on the plane. You better get on the plane now.
Wow.
It's gone on the charts. And because Radio 1 kept playing it and all the radio stations kept supporting it. So even though it had been handicapped, it sold and it sold and it sold and kept selling, and it went back to number 40 or number 39.
Amazing.
So I had to rush to the airport, get on a plane, get back. Getting off the plane. So in answer to your question, getting off the plane, that's when I knew something was happening, because there was a journalist waiting to meet me, and photographers, and it's like, well, what's happening? You know, suddenly you're in the charts and you're getting played already, but I wasn't in the country to promote the record. So it just happened kind of overnight.
Wow.
Went straight to the Top of the Pops studio, did Top of the Pops. Next morning, I was asked to do the cover of Smash Hits. So I got up after about 2 hours sleep. I got up to the cover of Smash Hits. I had to get back, so I'm going back to finish my other 3 days holiday. So I got on in the car, and I was driven at high speed back to the airport, being interviewed by the journalist. And they thought this was very glamorous. Oh, he flies in, he flies out. So me being me, I just typed it and said, oh, well, you know, I've got a place in New York, blah, blah, blah. Which it wasn't my flight, but I said it was. So the Motive suddenly happened and stayed in the charts for 3 months. So it was the highest played record on Radio 1 that year. And so we put Muscle Deep out on the back of it, remixed it, put it out again. And then Radio 1 read the lyrics and decided that it realized it was about prejudice and South Africa. And I put out a special box set which had these photographs in it, photo cards in it, and it had a fact sheet about South Africa. And it mentioned that like 100,000 children had disappeared under P.W. Botha's regime.
Yeah. So
Radio 1 went, whoop, we're not touching this. This is political. And they decided that the lyric, "It kicks you in the face sometimes," was too violent. So on the basis of that, they banned it. So it had gone to about 37 in the charts and then disappeared again. So this was it. Like, career was over again. It's like, so what we're going to do? So we better write another album. So we went off and we spent about 6 weeks in a rehearsal room down in Sussex, in an old barn. And we wrote the Big Area album. And and kind of the minute London heard Big Area, they knew they had something. So they said, if you can give us 10 more tracks like that, then we'll fund the album. In fact, we'll give you whatever budget you want to record the album. So they said, we'll give you carte blanche. I thought carte blanche was a recording studio in France. I thought, great. Oh, I'd love to work there. So I did. It was like Maison Rouge. So we recorded the album, and we kind of were aware that we had something because we'd done television shows. We kept doing TV shows during that year period because we went and recorded Big Area with Gary Langan at the Manor, and we knew it was a hit, but we hadn't recorded the rest of the album. So I said, look, we need to keep our profile up. So we kept a plugger kind of retained, and they kept getting his television shows. So we did about 10 TV shows during 1988 whilst we were recording the album, and that kept we kept playing, like we did the Montreux Pop Festival on the demo for Big Area. We kind of lied to them as well and told them that it was told a lot of lies in my career. We told them it was the single, and so we'd sold 35,000 records in advance, so we knew it was going to be a hit. So when that came out, to finally answer your question, I'm sorry they're so long-winded, but
oh mate, it's fascinating. It's really fascinating.
So it was a hard slog, and we'd done a lot of support tours, and we didn't have any money. We'd run out of money. Our advances had all expired. So Big Area got released, and it went flying in the charts. It went to number 19, and good old Gallup said, nope, they've been away for a year, and suddenly they released a single. And it's gone straight in the charts. It must be being hyped. So they busted it back to 21. I know.
there's a few things that as a fanboy I'd like to pick up on there. I mean, obviously this album is fantastic. There's some great songs on there. The Motive was the first song I heard. I mean, there's other great songs on there. Laughter Party. There's loads of great songs on there. I'll check the barcode later just to check this. Not fine.
No, it wasn't that. It was on the Motive single.
It's not Fine Young Cannibals. But then when you went on to the Big Area, as a keyboard player, and I like the strings and the sequences and stuff, the sound had changed a bit more. It was slightly more electronic than Sound of Music album, which was more guitar with synthesizers. But then the Big Area album, you had a lot of strings on there, like Reeling or the Big Area. There's lots of sequences going. The sound had changed, and it was really noticeable that your sound had been ramped up, and you'd got a lot bigger.
Yeah, we got produced, Mark. We became, and I knew that I'd done, everything I could with the first album. And the record company, Owen Davis and I had done the demo for Big Area, and London liked it. But the pressure of having to produce another record that we knew needed hits on it, like surefire hits, not just kind of like, because really the first album only had one hit. It only really had The Motive. So we knew we needed something. And I just couldn't handle the pressure of trying to produce the second album anyway. So the whole band agreed that we wanted some producers. So we interviewed loads of different producers, and we ended up with like 8. I did 3 tracks on it. I did Under Fire, Darkest Hour with Pete Henderson. Pete Henderson was the engineer who worked with Rick Knowles. So Rick Knowles did 4 tracks on it. So Pete was the common thread throughout the album, really. He's a genius, Pete. And Pete had produced Breakfast in America for Supertramp, and won a Grammy by the age of 25. Become a multi-millionaire. I mean, hugely successful. And Pete was really cool. Became Paul McCartney's engineer finally. So Pete, I did 2 tracks with Pete. I did a track called The Happening. It became a B-side with Pete. But other than those 3, we then used different producers. We used like sort of 6 different producers. And I think really it was Gary Langer's influence on Big Area. It really brought keyboards to the fore. I realized that we could do so much more with keys within with guitars, but also the thing being that we had a permanent keyboard player by this point. The first album, we'd had a couple of keyboard players, and we had to use a session player on most of it, called Mark Wright, because the guys we had working with us weren't good enough. A guy called Alex Mungo just wasn't good enough to play in the studio. And his work, he could write, but he couldn't play that well. And Ben, the original keyboard player, had left. So then, by the time we got to the second album, we had a brilliant keyboard player called Chris Udell. And because he was so good at coming up with these incredible sounds, and we realized that the sound of the Big Area album was defined by the track Big Area. So I think we sort of kept that ethos all the way through. And of course, new keyboards were being invented all the time. At that point, there was a massive sort of progression in the development of keyboards. And suddenly, whereas in the 80s, of course, it was all the early 80s, it was all analog synths. Suddenly you had polyphonic digital synths, the DX7, etc. Cool. And from there, you had all these amazing sounds you could create. And of course, sampling started to happen. And we suddenly realized that it opened this smorgasbord of opportunity where you could do almost anything on a keyboard. So we became obsessed with it. And also that we only had one guitarist on the first day. We only had Scott. Good old Scott. I do miss the guy. He's unfortunately passed now. We realised that we needed a second guitarist. So we got Rob Downs in. And Rob came and played a lot of amazing electric guitar and solos on the second album. But even he said, look, you need a bigger sound. You need a more of a synth sound, because that's where the beef's going to come from. What you're looking for and what we're all looking for here is something that's got some weight. And you can add as many guitars as you like. If you want to add some depth to an album, you need lots of strings and like whatever. So we went crazy on the synthesizers, and then added live strings as well. So it became a pretty huge sound. And I think that's the album that defined our commercial success. But the first album is probably the one that defines our organic, raw essence, if you like.
Belinda Carlisle appeared on here as well, didn't she? She did some backing vocals.
She did, yeah. Well, that's because, again, of Rick Knowles, who produced Belinda. I mean, I got Rick in. I'd met all his producers and interviewed loads of them, and a lot of them wanted to do it, but most of them were busy for like a year. And in America, the way I even met Bob Ezrin, the great Bob Ezrin, and he said, well, we routine everything, we rehearse everything for a year, and then we notate it. And I'm like, what? And he said, yeah, we don't just go in and record, not like England where you kind of demo, record companies say, yeah, and you go in and you record half the album, and if they like it, they give you the budget to do the rest of it. In America, everything is done in a much more controlled and particular way. So I said, well, and Bob Ezrin said, look, he said, I do concept albums. I don't do, he was lovely to me, really lovely man. And he said, look, I sang to him in his studio. And by this point, the first person told me I could sing. Said, love what you're doing, but your songs, it's not a concept album. There's a theme, but it's not a concept album. I only do concept albums. So what you need really is to work with different people that are going to bring out different elements of what you do. So I think really that inspired me to use different people. And all the producers that I at first wanted to work with were either busy or they wanted to take an awful long time over the process. And I wanted to get in and get out. So we managed to get a great lineup. And Rick Knowles said to me, he just produced Belinda Carlisle and Stevie Nicks. He'd done all Belinda's records, actually, all Belinda's solos album. And I loved the sound of them. And driving through Los Angeles to meet various producers, I kept hearing Belinda on the radio, and I thought there's something about that sound. And then Stevie Nicks, and I thought, I want that sound. I love the essence, the modernity, but still that kind of folky element that's going on there. And so I met Rick, and we got on really well. And he said, well, hey, I can probably get Belinda to come sing with you. And I'm like, really? So at that point,
right, then.
yeah. So that kind of clenched the deal for me. And Belinda came along, and she was incredibly busy. So she didn't have to, it was going to be a duet, but she didn't have time to do a whole duet. So she came and laid down some backing vocals, and it was superb. It was a real joy to work with her, and did the video, took time out of her schedule. She's a wonderful, she's as nice in person as she is. I see her in interviews, and she was amazing and came and really made the record for us. But unfortunately, London Records screwed that up, and they released it in the wrong order, and they put out the gatefold 12-inch. There should have been the 7-inch, and then the 12-inch, and then the gatefold 12-inch, and they put all that in the wrong order. Yeah. And so that didn't do so well, and it was too rock for radio. They considered it a bit too rock, so we kind of went a bit overly heavy on the guitars. We listened to that, there's a lot more guitar on that than the rest of the album. So perhaps we should have put out something like "You Ought to Know," that perhaps was a bit more like Big Area. But we all loved the song so much. And David Munday who co-wrote it with Sandy Stewart and Rick, and I had some input on the writing as well. Didn't get credited, but it was. We heard the song and said, "We want that. We got to have that song. We're having that." Yeah. It was the first time, the only time we've ever included a song that we didn't write on an album, other than Roxy Music's "Prairie Rose." So, but David Munday played guitar on that, and he was doing some astonishing things. And I won't go into it, but he could do things to a guitar that other people have never done and never will be able to. Yeah. And we loved the record. And then we also made the decision to do Terry Wogan's show rather than Top of the Pops, which I don't know if that was a good idea or not in retrospect. It didn't bode well for Radio 1. Of course, if you do Top of the Pops, you get played in Radio 1. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, after that, I mean, your solo career, like with him, I mean, you did and Mark reminded me about it the other day, to be fair. You that almost album, you got involved with Andy Taylor, right, from Duran Duran?
I did, yeah. What it was is that I produced it myself again. Before I left the band, before we split the band, I started writing with Chris Udell, the keyboard player. The deal was, just to clear the air on this, Everybody in the band had solo options.
Right.
And London Records said, all right, you put out 2 albums now. It's time for a solo record. So I thought, well, you know, Brian Ferry being one of my great heroes. In 1973, Roxy released 3 albums. Brian released Another Time, Another Place, covers album. And then they released 2 studio albums. So I thought, oh, I'll bang out a solo album and then we'll nip back in the studio and record a third Then Jericho album. Not realizing that the scheduling and everything has to take months to be, you know, prepared and lined up, because a record company can only really, an independent label can only release 4 albums a year, realistically. Yeah. So you can't just rush them on that thing. And by this time, London had become very successful and there was a lot more artists waiting to be released. So they said, look, you know, while you go and write another Then Jericho record, we want your solo album. So I've been writing with Chris Udell, and the stuff I was writing wasn't right for Then Jericho. And the other guys in the band went and did their demos for their solo albums, but London just didn't like them. And at this point, London Records said, right, we're going to drop the band and we're going to keep you. And we're going to call it Then Jericho. And I went, no, you're not. Now, don't get me wrong. When I say London Records, 99% of the people that worked for the company were lovely, and I got on really well with them, and I have a lot of respect and owe them a great debt of gratitude for the hard work they did making it successful. It was the guys at the top who are very single-minded, and they just said, well, no, you know, you're the band. It's not them. We don't like the band. We didn't like their attitude. I was doing all the press. I was doing most of the kind of work, if you like. Because I'd write back to the fans, and I was doing all the kind of, you know, all the publicity. And they said, well, you co-direct the videos and you co-produce the records and you write all the lyrics and all the melodies and part of the music. So you are Then Jericho, which is a common misconception because it wasn't. It was a band. Yeah. I was just the guy at the front, really, that had a lot of the drive. And yes, it was a lot of my idea, but I wasn't the band. I was just a large part of it. But they said, we're going to drop the band. So I got offered a deal by EMI, and I said to the guys, come with me, and the guys didn't want to come. So I went off and did almost for EMI.
Take your place in the line with all the other failures, and shake your head out of time with your childhood saviors. Try telling myself lies, try forcing open smiles, kept hoping one night I would find a way home.
Before I got signed, I went into a studio that a friend of mine owned in central London, and I got together my dream band with Guy Pratt on bass, the legend, my dear friend Guy Pratt. And Guy's been a hero of mine since I first saw him play bass with Ice House. And I always wanted to work with Guy, and got to know him a bit as a friend, and just still, I still kind of get very starstruck whenever I see or speak to Guy. And he said to me, if you can get Dave Palmer to play drums, because he's my best friend, he said, if you can get Dave Palmer, because we've never worked together, but if you can get Dave Palmer, I'll do the album. So I rang Dave Palmer, and Dave said, if you can get Guy Pratt, I'll do the album. So I said, great. So I got the dream rhythm section, and got some amazing musicians together, went into a studio, recorded it, took it to EMI, and they said, well, yeah, it's not quite right. It doesn't sound anything like Then Jericho, not even vaguely. It's not really what we want. So I was sort of facing the same situation I had before, whereby, you know, I could potentially get dropped. And I didn't know what to do. So I went along to see Andy Taylor at a studio. He was producing Gun. And I wanted Andy to play on the album because I got some amazing musicians on that record.
Yeah.
Molly Duncan from the Average White Band, Gary Wallace, who was in Pink Floyd, percussionist in Pink Floyd. He played drums on Tidal Wave and played percussion. I mean, some really phenomenal people. Got Fee Trench to do the strings, feeded all the strings for Van Morrison and Thin Lizzy. And I thought, I need a really heavy. I had Steve Boltz, who was playing with Paul Young. And I thought, I need a really heavy rhythm guitarist. And Andy was doing a lot of production for a lot of rock bands at that point. And I heard he's worked with the Almighty and Thunder. And I thought, I heard he was producing Gun. And I thought, remixing Gun. And I love Gun.
He must have been working on that track. Is it Shame? Shame on
That's
You?
The one. He did Shame, yeah. He did.
Because the intro to that is phenomenal.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
One of my favourite all-time songs and tracks. I mean, that's just so good. So I went on to see Andy. and he was actually mixing that track at the time, bizarrely. I wanted to play my record. So I left him the recordings I'd done, gave him a cassette of it, and he sent it over by bike the next day, and he put a load of guitar on it, on 3 of the tracks. He just played on top of it, on top of the cassette. Wow. And I went, that's astonishing. That's changed the whole dimension. So I went back to the album, went back to the company, and I said, look, I want to work with Andy. And I'd done 2 tracks. I'd recorded 2 tracks with the guys from the KLF, the engineers, Nick Kohler and Ian Richardson, who were the producers behind the KLF, apart from Bill Drummond, of course. They were producing the KLF. So the one that got away on Almost was produced by Nick Richardson and Ian Richardson and Nick Kohler. But Andy came in and just sort of rearranged the whole thing. So I'll do the album, but I want to record lots of guitars over the top of it. So we kept all the rhythm section, kept probably 80% of what was there, but Andy came and played guitar on it, put some backing vocals on it, got new vocals out of me, and we re-recorded Under Your Spell from the start. That had been done by the guys from the KLF. But Andy said, no, that's a rock song, man. We're going to turn that into a rock song. So I went out to do an interview, a whole day of interviews, and I came back and Gary Wallace and Dave Farmer, Guy Pratt and Andy Taylor had re-recorded Under Your Spell as a rock song, whereas before it was more of a synth, kind of like a synthy dance-based rock song. And they just turned it into a 4-piece no-nonsense rock and roll song. Yeah, so that was fascinating. So we put the album out, and then unfortunately what happened was EMI were buying Virgin, and and they spent a lot of money on lawyers, because it's a very small company, EMI, an independent company, still the smallest independent, the biggest of the independent labels, but still an independent, didn't have the finances that other companies had. So to buy Virgin was a big ask. And the week before they did business with Richard, they apparently he kind of doubled his price and decided he wanted a lot more money, or realized the value of the label was worth a lot more, because he had the Pistols, he had the Stones, he had Simple Minds, and he had Boy George, of course, so Culture Club. So EMI basically had to drop 80% of their roster to be able to afford to buy Virgin, and they'd spent so much money on legal out-of-house legals that they on the legal bills, that they had to go ahead with the sale. So they said to me, well, sorry, you're unrecouped along with everybody else. So I got dropped with EMF and Jesus Jones and bands who were having #1 records. And my infinite wisdom, I had actually gone and released my own co-produced version of Love So Bright as a single before the album was ready, which didn't make them very happy, because I kind of went out and I got the World Music Cafe with Paul Yates and Jules Holland. Paul Yates and Bruno Brooks were the hosts of that show. So I'd done that as a live TV show, and I also did Blue Peter. So I put out Love So Bright, but the album wasn't ready. So I mean, in fairness, EMI didn't put any real support behind the thing. They said, well, if it's a hit, you haven't got an album ready to go. And then they accidentally, on purpose, pressed about 10,000 copies with a B-side on both sides. So it didn't chart any higher than about 57, I don't think. So I missed it by a whisker yet again. But there you go.
My favourite song on there is Tidal Wave. I love that song.
Thank you very much indeed.
That's a really beautiful song.
See, guys, I have to pause this for 1 minute. I've got a 4 o'clock Zoom interview. I've talked for so much. I've got a 4 o'clock Zoom. I'm going to have to tell this guy that I can't do it and come back to you. Is that all right?
For all the wicked lies I've told, the master's
We won't keep you much longer, mate. And honestly, I could talk to you all day, to be honest.
Yeah, it's really.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I do waffle on. I do apologise, guys.
Hey, you don't. Do you know what? It's not, mate. I just love the fact that it's so honest. And honestly, I was saying to Mark when you're off, like the journey you've been on is like, all testament to credit to you. You know.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been kind of like, yeah, I've been really close to cracking it so many times, and kind of gotten there, but not quite. We never became huge. And
but what you've achieved, mate, is great. I mean, you've got some phenomenal songs and albums and play, and you know, it's just like, I mean, me and Andy were saying while you was off. As our band, we got to a level. We played a lot of the places you played, but we didn't get that final.
Yeah.
But I mean, what you did, and you're blagging it and all that stuff, is exactly what you need to do to get that. And we didn't do that. We was a bit too nice. I think we was expecting people to be falling over themselves and just be interested enough. But you know, it's for me, it's amazing to listen to your stories. Understand the politics that obviously goes on between charts, labels, and record companies, and all the bullshit that you have to put up with, and the lines you've got to move between to get. I
think the other thing to put into context, Mark. You know, 30 odd years later, people still queuing up to see you, which tells you a lot, right? So you got a lot.
That's very true, actually. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things that, you know, it was always important for me to be good live. That's a hugely important thing. So I mean, and I love playing live. And I think that kind of comes across. But I'm also very lucky that we just got some really, really, you know, we got some really loyal fans. We have. We're so lucky that way.
The thing is, what Mark said, we're fascinated, but our audience, you know, our 10,000 or whatever audience, will be just as fascinated to hear this because they're all music fans. You know, they're all.
That's great. Thank you. We signed separately to MCA in America, which possibly was a mistake. I was thinking that, you know, great idea. That means that when we get the advance from America, it'll come to us. Whereas normally when you sign to a record label, each territory that releases the record gives the advance to the home label, you know, the country of origin. So they recoup their expenditure.
Yeah.
The same with videos. You make a video and then they sell it onto another country and they end up making a lot of money out of it. But of course, all that happened was the fact we got signed to MCA and they just gave the advance straight to London Records. Anyway, so it sort of paid off some of our debt. But the MCA did not understand us at all, even though we got Charlie Sexton. I became mates with Charlie, who's another hero of mine. And I managed to, I didn't get to fly out to work. I flew out to the States, had a chat with him, then couldn't get to the studio when he played on it. So him and Arthur Barrow, who is a brilliant bass player and keyboard player, worked with Frank Zappa. So that shows how good you got to be. You know, anyone who knows their music, Frank Zappa. Zappa would notate everything he ever did. So immensely complex music. And they remixed Let Her Fall for the American market and played on it. And I got Charlie, said, what do you want? I said, I want a guitar solo. I want something like kind of like Adrian Belew does for Bowie. So I said, oh, you mean this kind of thing? So did that lovely, nice, gnarly guitar. And so then he added, so I ordered some backing vocals. So I sang the backing vocals to him over the phone and he came and did the Bowie backing vocal part. Outsang me completely. But it still didn't help because the American record companies didn't really get us. They couldn't. So there's big arguments over the record sleeves, and I was like, I wanted to do the record. I do my own record sleeves. No, it doesn't happen. No. This guy in the record company, he does the sleeves. You just do what you're told. Oh. It was very much that kind of thing of like, in America, you are the artist, and that's all you are. You are the singer, you're the songwriter, you're not the kind of, and you can't go there and kind of tell them what to do. And I tried, and finally, they made the choice to release either the Fine and Cannibals album, the Raw and the Cooked, or Big Area. And they chose to release the Raw and the Cooked, which you can see why, because of course the movie, which drives me crazy, gave them a huge opportunity out there. And even though we got Big Area on the Slipstream soundtrack, Slipstream wasn't a hugely successful movie. So we kind of almost we played a few gigs in the States, but we never toured. And of course, if you want to crack the States, you've got to go and you've got to tour it. So I think part of what happened with us was that we sort of ended up not generating enough money for record companies. And as a result, that meant we didn't have the money, or they didn't have the money to give us to keep on touring. So my touring kind of went out the window because, of course, touring's expensive and you have to have support from record companies to do it.
She's been kissing everyone. Forgive me, I'm not that strong. I dive into the arms of fury. And when your darkness comes, you still have to face tomorrow. This is a song for the broken-hearted.
So everything I've been able to do since then has just been whatever I've been able to literally finance myself. So it's kind of like I'll get a gig in, and then if I can afford to travel somewhere and pay the band and hire a van, then we'll go and do it. So a lot of people ask us why we don't play more gigs. It's just finances. We literally have to rely upon whatever fees we can get from promoters. And of course, with the industry being what it is at the moment, and ticket sales being low and charges going up, costs going up, it's so expensive to tour, So it's killing us really, because I mean, we're going to go out and going to do 4 shows, 4 Academy shows. We'd like to go and play the whole country, but it literally is financially impossible. And because I've never had a royalty check in my life, I've never received I've had publishing royalties, but I've never received a recorded royalty. So I don't have an income. It's not as if I can go out there and finance things. I think a lot of fans think that I'm kind of this wealthy guy that, why didn't he spend his own money? And they take it. They take it to heart. I think we're ignoring them, but we just don't have the finances to tour.
Yeah.
But, I want to thank all of our fans who listen to this, and thank you all for your support, because it is for them that I keep going. If it wasn't for their constant support and encouragement, I probably would have, faded away a long time ago. But no, I keep flogging that horse, like I say.
That's great, mate. and so Mark mentioned that Cherry Red, you got that Before the Future box set out, which is great. So for all our EC people watching, if you haven't got it, go and check it out. Well worth grabbing.
Thank you very much. I'm very proud of this. Actually, it was this little thing. Yeah, it was quite the hardest thing to do.
I've opened my one. You haven't opened your one.
You notice it's all shiny. That's right. I'm gonna sell it on eBay. What's funny is that within about a day of it being released, there are dozens of them on eBay and Amazon being sold for like 150 quid, and I'm like, come on. So
what I love about this is that I've got all these on various CD singles and all over the place, but these are all in one place, remastered on a box set and sounding amazing. And
thank you.
It's a great great thing to have.
Cherry Red have done a great job on it, Cherry. I've got to say, they worked really hard on it. Everybody there.
And it's a great booklet as well.
Well, I've got to say, Keith actually did he did the sleeve for us. It's the first time I've ever not done a sleeve, but he's just astonishing. He's absolutely brilliant. He did sleeves for Left Field and loads of bands and Sleeper and stuff, and he's so talented. And so I work very closely with the record label. I write all the sleeve notes, whatever, and help with listen to all the remaster. But it was brilliantly remastered, and I'm just very happy with it. And the hard thing was finding photographs that hadn't been used before. Because, of course, what happens when a record company gets sold to another record company, most of the stuff, most of the often the recordings, as I think you probably know, but all the photographs and the promotional material just gets chucked in a skip. So if you ever see a skip outside a record company, dive in there, because you're going to find all kinds of things. And there's, of course, when a lot of the pictures are taken of us were taken on film, on celluloid. And then, of course, when things became digitized, it was so expensive for people to take photographs and turn them and digitize them. Yeah. A lot of photographers just couldn't translate them. So it was very hard to find a picture. I managed to come up with a few shots with the help of Kyron Armstrong, and Kyron's the guy that helps with our social media. So I must thank Kyron, because without him, I wouldn't have got half those pictures. And also my friend James Downs, who does thenjerico.com. So Kyron for all his help with social media, and James all his help with thenjerico.com, and all those people who help me and support me, and my girlfriend Rebecca as well. Without these people, Then Jerico wouldn't exist, you know. So I'm very lucky.
How did this happen? Did Cherry Red approach you and just pull it all together, or what was the?
Yeah, actually, it's the guy who's head of the label, John Reed, his name is. John's been chasing me for quite a few years when I was with Warner Music, and he kept saying, "Look, I want to release all the unreleased tracks, all the tracks that weren't released on CD. I want to put them out on CD because there's a market for it." And I was like, "Well, I don't really want to do that, you know. I don't want to just release." They said, "Just for the fans." But he kept chasing me. At that time, he was taking the label over, but he was he was still in law school, I believe. But he's a very talented man, and he just said, "Look, I'm going to put this record out, come hell or high water." And then a couple of years ago, Warner's sold the whole of London Records to a company called Because, who are a French label, Because Music. And they bought the whole London Records catalogue, everything except New Order and Joy Division, because they have their own contractual situation. All the rest of us got sold on to Because Music, and Because licensed it to Cherry Red. So then I get this very nice email one day from the product manager saying, "Hello, we're going to be releasing a box set by you, and would you like to be involved?" It was kind of that. It's like, we're doing it with you or without you. But they wanted to put out the like use Sugar Box, the Sugar Box single as the sleeve, and they didn't really know much about the band. They didn't have any of the inner knowledge, the esoteric knowledge, and they didn't have any photographs for it. And they weren't sure which tracks were which, and you know, which mixes were which and whatever, because a lot of the sleeve notes have been lost because when London were bought by Warner Brothers, they just got rid of half of the information. So I worked very closely with them for it took about 6 months in total to make sure all the facts were correct, to make sure every mix, and we got everything we'd ever released, with the exception of 2 tracks. One is a version of The Happening that has a backing vocal on it by a lovely lady called Kirsty, who ran a studio we worked at. She's a brilliant singer. So she isn't on that. There was a version of What's Happening with her doing backing vocals. That's the one track we can't seem to find. And there's another 12-inch version of Muscle Deep, the original version of Muscle Deep, the 12-inch extended, before Julian Mendelsohn remixed it. So those 2 tracks are missing. But other than that, it's everything we ever recorded, apart from a few demos which we don't think are good enough to release. But yeah, I'm very pleased with it. It's nice that they've worked so hard at it, and that the fans are happy with it. That's what matters to me.
That's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Thank you, guys.
Is there any more new music in the pipe for you down the line, or?
There is, yeah. Well, I've been writing since kind of Orgasmophobia. I started my own record label when I got dropped by AMI. Put the Orgasmophobia album out, or wrote the Orgasmophobia album. Funded it myself, self-financed it. So it took quite a long time. Then got Eagle Rock to release it, and they just flunked it. They didn't put any promotion behind it, so that's disappeared. And after that, I released sort of live records. I put a few live records out, Alive and Exposed, and Radio Jericho, which is a recording of us live at Hammersmith Odeon, plus all our radio sessions. But then running your own record label is extremely hard work. I mean, it's very difficult. And I just got swamped with demos by other bands who didn't understand that it wasn't a label to release other people's music. It was a label just for me. But I ran out of money. And then so I kept writing. And then about 7 or 8 years ago, I split up with my second wife, and ended up all my stuff ended up in storage, and all my demos are in there somewhere, and I couldn't get access to them. And then lockdown happened, and I just can't. I live in a tiny little flat, and I haven't got room to go to the storage unit, and all my life's possessions are in there. So that's up in London, and I'm now down in Kent, and I don't have the room for them. So everything I've got, all my new tracks are kind of up there, and they're not, because I don't store them digitally because I don't want them to get disappeared or hacked or whatever. So they're all on a hard drive up there somewhere. So I have got about 20 new songs that I need to go and get. So I will go and dig them out, but I've got to go through a mountain, it's floor to ceiling packed with all my possessions. And it would take a lot. It would take 4 strong and very willing men to come in and help me pull it out.
So
there you go. There you go. It'd be great. Well, come and help me, lads.
Mate, more than happy to.
So I need to get my finger out and start writing again. But I mean, the guys in the band are all saying, "Look, Mark, come write. We must write." So I must get back to writing. So I will be writing new music. And when I dig out all these tracks that are hidden in the lockup, then I will be able to hopefully release another album.
Please let us know when they're ready and done, because we'll happily post them on our socials and channels and just get everyone.
Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Last question. Desert Island disc. We ask every artist we talk, what's your Desert Island disc?
It has to be Heroes by Bowie. It has to be.
Love that.
That record changed my life and changes my life every single time I hear it. And every time I hear him sing it, it makes me realize that I'm never going to be in the same. You really can't even mention Mark Shaw and David Bowie in the same breath. But there you go. I just have. It's just an outstanding record.
We spoke to Thomas Dolby, who played Heroes at Live Aid with Bowie. He was on.
Did he? Oh, of course, yeah.
He was on keyboards, and I said to him, as a keyboard player, even though it's a simple song, was you shitting yourself?
Yeah.
Yourself having that Heroes line, and he said, yeah. He said he had to really concentrate, because even though it's the same pattern, it does change halfway through, but it is a phenomenal song.
It's really clever. The tambourine comes in halfway through, phenomenally loud as well, right in the middle of the mix, which I love. Yes, and it's also, if you listen to Tony Visconti's some of his webcasts or his podcasts, there's a really unusual passage of keyboards that just only for like about 8 bars, some really weird keyboard part that comes in that's totally discordant. And he said, even I don't even know what it does. That's just Bowie.
Yeah, brilliant.
My hero as well.
Has he? Oh, he's a god. He was a god. He was the best, greatest, and it inspires me all the time.
Thanks, mate. Absolutely.
God bless you guys. I'm sorry it wasn't long. I really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks. Cheers, Andy. Cheers, Mark. God bless.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Suddenly strange, it opens up and finds something deep inside that tells you you are the fool to end yourself. Such assuming games. Take yourself and make your name and leave you there without your dreams.